All right, guys, I think we are now live. Let me just check the site. I want to welcome everybody to our Wednesday nights conversations with Cougars. And I have one of my oldest and dearest friends from childhood with me, Carrie Johnson Kurlander, with us. Hey, Carrie, good evening.
Hello, Bernard. How much fun is this?
Oh, it's going to be so much fun. Thank you for joining us
Oh my
tonight.
goodness, such an honor to be here. I told you though, when you asked me to do this, I can't remember stats very well. I can't remember a lot, but I'm totally confident that you'll jog my memory. So good to be
We
here.
we
Go
will
Cougars.
we will get there, I promise you. But guys, for those of you who may not know Carrie, and I bet there's only one or two maybe younger people who weren't part of our time period there. Carrie was co-captain of the '85 squad. She was cheerleader throughout the years at Northview, and she graduated same class as me, and we were part of that same state championship season and team in 1985. And I've asked Carrie to come on today. She's in the Atlanta suburbs, and we taken a little break from having coaches and managers and players on. We're going to get the perspective from a cheerleader. And I'm so happy to see Carrie and spend some time. And Carrie, we got all kind of folks rolling through here. Let me share who's on here and sharing some love. Blake Binge, your brother JJ, Pat Fitch, Coach Rick Cleveland, CC Dixon, Eric McAllister, all kind of folks are rolling through here.
Love hearing those names. It just conjures it with each of those names. I have very specific memories. Love it. Love it. Love
and
it.
we may jog some of those memories as we go through this. Carrie, before we go way back, tell folks what you're doing these days. Tell everybody about your beautiful family, and we'll get started that way.
Well, I have been in Atlanta now for about 10 years. I guess I could go way back. I married a New Yorker, Brian Kurlander, and we've been married going on 23 years. Brian is an actor, and you may see him from time to time on some of your favorite Netflix shows or on an airplane, and he does a lot of theater as well. We have two kids who are 20 and 17. I have a rising junior in college and a daughter who just graduated high school last week. And for those of you who have kids who are marking these milestones, be it a high school graduation or weddings, all of those milestone things, she has adapted, as have so many kids, and really made the most of it. And I'm really proud of her. And we had two dogs, which you may hear, Freddie Mercury and Mozart, Freddie and Mo, and they are chewing on bones, but if they start chiming in, just goes with the COVID-19 quarantine.
It certainly does. And, assuming we get back to some sense of normalcy in the next few months, hopefully Jack and Ellie will go back to school. Well, Ellie will go to school and Jack will go back for his senior year. And you guys will be empty nesters except for Freddie and Mo, and that's going to be a change for you.
I know, we're already feeling it. I've got a Scrabble board right in front of me. The kids are not here right now, and Brian and I broke out the Scrabble the other night, and the deafening silence in the house was really a new thing that we're going to have to get used to. But
I am sure.
You know our address, and Bernard, you've been here from time to time, and the light is always on for you and your guests. So
thank you.
Anyway.
Thank you. Carrie, Shirley C., your mom, Ramona Stanley Walker, all kind of folks are rolling in here, and they all say hello so and share their love with you tonight.
Hey, Ramona. Ramona and I were cheerleaders, and we would room together at cheerleader camp at Auburn. And we would have to get up at 6 a.m. and go hard. And, I don't remember a whole lot of breaking. I just remember being really hot and flopping in bed at night in the dorms at Auburn. But Ramona and I just had some really good laughs back then.
Absolutely.
And when we tried out for cheerleader back in the day, the stunts that we did, I'm pretty sure I did a cartwheel, a split, and a dive roll. So none of the things that you see on ESPN and popping them up in a chair, none of that.
No, and the pom-poms weighed about 25 pounds each, if I remember correctly. I don't even know if they use them anymore.
Oh my goodness.
But I can remember when you guys tried out for cheerleader each year, and I guess it was in the spring, everybody came to the gym to wait for the announcements, and it was everybody outside in the parking lot or in the grounds between the parking lot and the gym, and waiting for either Miss Hemby or somebody to call out who the next year's squad was going to be. And I just remember there being so much nervousness in the air
So much
for
drama.
that to be announced.
So much drama.
Mhm.
And I think we would get like a carnation that had the bow of the maroon and gold. Yeah, good times, really good times. And goodness, I think about every week while y'all were getting ready to win the national championship, we would get ready for the pep rallies, and we would always decorate the locker rooms, which smelled really bad, and put candies and balloons and all sorts of things to cheer you guys on. So it was good times.
Well, one of the advantages I think that you had and others had of having older siblings who were in the football program, like your brother Joseph, you were around it more than some of our classmates who were football players or cheerleaders or band or whatever. Let's go back to middle school. Joseph was on that 81 state championship team. We were 8th graders. I was still mad at my parents for not letting me go to Legion Field that day, but that's another story for another time. But I want to get your perspective as the younger sister, still in middle school. Joseph's part of that great team. Do you have any recollections or time periods? Maybe it's just being in the car with your folks and Joseph, or going to a game or something. That's such precious times. But take us back to middle school.
Okay, I will tell you. So the impression is so deep that I was texting with my mother. I spoke with my brother earlier. Hey, Mama. Hey, Joseph. And my mother actually remembers the song that was playing on the field at Legion Field. It was Angel is a Centerfold by Jay Giles Band. My mother remembered that music, they had like these do-rags that one was maroon, one was gold. Right. And I'm thinking Libba Hanahan, I know, was on that cheering squad. Gosh, it's hard for me to jog my memory.
Rosemary Bunton.
Sorry,
yeah, I'm gonna Kim Wise. Let's see, maybe Jill Taylor. Some of you guys who are watching who know Jackie Miller, I see that you're with us tonight. Give us some of those names of that 81 squad. I'm just trying to think, maybe Tracy Kazaya might have been on that team. But right. That's incredible. Your mom remembers that song being played.
I mean, the pride, because I mean, it really was. I remember studying my brother's yearbook. I knew every name from every class. I probably knew those first 4 years, the people who went to Northview, better than my 4 years, because I was the little sister and I would study the yearbook. And then, Joseph's class was the first class that went all the way through. So they started the first year that Northview opened, they were the freshman class. So they were the first ones that went all the way through. And to win state championship their senior year just felt like pixie dust had been sprinkled on, Dothan. And then
absolutely.
4 years later,
Jackie,
again.
Yeah.
What's that?
Jackie Miller's coming through big time. Kelly Peacock, Andy Bird, Jackie Bingham, Wendy West, Tina Reagan. She's just throwing all these names. Thank you, Jackie. That's awesome to help us with that. John David Edwards, good to see you, bud. Coach Josh Parrish is with us. John Reddick, Steve Stutz, all kind of Cougars are in there. So thank you, guys. But Carrie, let's talk about our transition out of middle school, out of Girard, and headed over to Northview. And I know you had been over to the campus before we actually started school as a 9th grader. What was some of your initial impressions as we got, leaving the middle school and going to the big time over to the big campus?
Well, as we all know, it was so vast. And I can remember, I don't remember which year, maybe sophomore year, I had a class, it was Spanish, that was all the way down where ROTC, that hall.
600 hall with Mr. Grigsby.
Way on that end. And then I had my next class was down in the arts building where band and theater was. And I think
that's the other end of the world.
It was. So 5 minutes to get from one to the next, and there would be a tardy bell and then, in your seats. So I remember the vastness of it. And just the collisions with people in the hall. It was so, I mean, we really did have magic in a bottle at that time, going through the halls and the relationships that we had. And because there was this newness with Northview still being really just in its early years, there was this great pride, especially with that championship team in 82?
81.
81. That, I think we all felt like we had landed at a really special place. And I just remember changing classes. And one fun fact, Lawrence Dawsey, who I know has been on the show, Lawrence and I were born the same day. We are both November 16, 1967 babies. I've just dated myself. And I would exaggerate the story further and say that we were born in the same hospital. And I would say we knew each other as babies. I don't know if we really were born in the same hospital, but same day. And he and I had lockers right next to each other. So just the collisions that you had in the hallways during locker. I remember eating a lot of pecan pie out of the vending machine.
I'm sure your mother's so proud.
So proud. Just sweet, precious memories, truly.
Hey, for $1.25, you could get rectangle pizza, French fries, and your choice of either pink or yellow lemonade.
True.
For $1.25, I probably ate that 90% of my high school time. I was there.
Lemonade. And the pizza, that was good. Good stuff. I loved it.
It was good stuff. And excuse me, Carrie, we got Matt Blevins, Jason Mullins, Caroline Hanahan Glover, and Bruce Johnson have all joined us. So thank you guys for stopping by for a few minutes. We're talking with Carrie Johnson Kurlander, class of 86, same class as me. She was co-captain of the cheerleading squad with Elizabeth Ball Tucker, who was the captain that year. And I can vividly remember as ninth graders, us sitting upstairs for the pep rallies. And the volume of noise that came up to us was so awesome. The level of school spirit, and particularly when Dr. Smith did his poem at the end and the student body finished the poem for him or with him, those were just some magical memories from high school.
They really are. I passed through from Atlanta to seeing my mother and brother in Dothan, and then we a lot of times go down to Florida. And my kids have grown up with Dr. Smith's name right there on the side of the gym. It is required behavior in our car when we're driving by Northview to do, we are Northview. And we do that every time coming and going. And when there are kids in the car, friends, the kids will say, okay, we have to do the Northview cheer. And then I've told them about don't meet me there, beat me there every time we see Dr. Smith's name.
So awesome.
Deep embedded sweet memories.
Carrie, I learned a few weeks ago, Keith Rice was on the show and I never knew this story. His memories are so embedded in his mind and his heart. He proposed to his now wife on the practice field at the campus.
Wow.
I mean, I never knew that. Such a sweet story he shared with us a few weeks ago. I hope he comes on. I hope he comes on tonight. But Carrie, let's talk about what was it like being a cheerleader, let's say in 9th and 10th grade. We had a 9th grade squad, then you had JV, and then you had varsity. But as a 9th grader, we had a 9th grade football team, and you guys cheered at those games. Yeah. Any memories of that? Anything that comes to mind?
I just remember, so if you grew up in Dothan, going to Rip Hughes Stadium as a little kid, I can remember being really little and seeing Terry Devane at Dothan High School before there was a Northview High School twirling fire batons. And I can remember Stedman Shealy. I mean, these are names that when you're a little kid, they're the celebrities of the hometown. Yeah. So the excitement of getting to go to Rip Hughes for your time, our time, those 4 years was really like hitting the pinnacle of your life experience to that time. Yeah. And so I just remember the anticipation of game week and getting to the actual game and the smell of the grass and having the Rip Hughes Stadium grass on my shoes. at the end of the game, and I could smell it right now, Bernard. And my mother reminded me, you'll have to tell me if you remember this. I didn't remember. She said it rained a lot the year that you took us to championship.
It did. In fact, Carrie, we had a hurricane that came through. The first game was against Robert E. Lee. There was a hurricane that weekend. So our game got pushed from Friday to Saturday. Storm was still there. So it got pushed to Monday afternoon. And we ended up playing 3 games in the first 10 days of our senior year.
How did you do that? How did you keep that stamina up? What was the drill?
That was all a credit to the coaches and the way they handled it. We just did what they told us to do. And I don't really remember. A lot of it is a blur in between the games. I've been able to watch the films of those games, so that comes back to mind. But I don't really remember much of the downtime in between those games. But your mom is right. We had a lot of rain that year. We had a lot of overtime games. But one of the things, I know I was going to tell you, when Stedman Shealy was coming through Dothan High and they went to the state championship game 2 years in a row, we were 7 and 8 years old. And I can barely remember. I have memories of walking up to the stadium and just being so overwhelmed at how huge everything was, you know, when you're a little kid. But you're right, getting to play at Rip Hughes for a lot of us, even though it's a pretty nondescript stadium, it's where we spent our high school years with such memories, good or bad. But you're absolutely right. You're right, Miss C. It was the game on Labor Day. You're exactly right. That in the August of going into September of '85, our senior year.
Okay, so Bernard, I've known you. We talk all the time. We've known each other since Miss Prim's 4 years old. I think we're standing next to each other in our kindergarten picture. But so during that week, because we had the cheerleaders, we were getting our dances ready and making signs that went up in the stadium and in the gym. So where was your headspace going into a game? And as the stakes got higher and higher, when you really understood you had something just right here in reach, where was your headspace as a 16 or 17-year-old? A lot of pressure.
Well, that going into our senior year, we thought we were world beaters. Like most seniors do. You have all this confidence. This is our year. As I mentioned to Lawrence, I remember a discussion that we had early in the season that this was our time, our year. But then we started the season at 1-3. Lawrence broke his arm, if you remember, the very first series of the very first game, and sat out the next 4 games. But he came back close to homecoming, and then that just sparked us, and we won 10 of 11 to go on to the title. But it took until Lawrence came back to give us back our mojo, so to speak. But then even still, Carrie, we had all of those overtime games. So by the time we got to the state finals against Huffman, we'd already played 5 overtimes. We'd already come from way back against Lee the week before. Clark Lopez kicks the field goal in overtime to beat Fairhope to put us into the state title game. By then, we kind of were able to let our hair down just a little bit, but not too much, because Huffman, the week before the state title game, had beaten the number 2 team in the country, J.O. Johnson out of Huntsville. So here we go again. But then by halftime of the state title game, we were up 25-7, and we're kind of on cruise control at that point. But it really was not until that third quarter, going into the fourth quarter of the final game, when Coach Parrish pulled all the starters, let everybody else play. We were able to take off our pads, stand on the bleachers, and look back at the crowd. Now, as years go on, there were 150,000 people in Rip Hughes Stadium that game. Reality, it was more like 22 to 24,000. But then it seemed like everybody in the world, last one out, turn your lights off when you leave in Dothan. And there's some pictures that show this. I'll try and find them if I haven't already posted them. It wasn't until then, when we were standing on the bleachers and looking back at all of our friends and our buddies and you guys and family members, that we realized we had done it. It wasn't, you couldn't until then, because of all those crazy games we had. And one of the things that maybe you guys, not being football players, very much part of the team and doing your thing, but we were the last place team to make the playoffs that year. there were some crazy things that happened in the season. Us losing to Dothan actually was a good thing for us. But Coach Parrish famously tells that when the coaches all had to go to Montgomery to the Friday after the last game, so the seating, the pairings were put together. Northview and Opelika were seated next to each other, just ABCs wise. And when they called out Northview 6-4, ranked last in the standings as far as the playoffs were. And then Opelika is ranked number 1. They were undefeated, number 1 in the state at the time. They're kind of snickering at Coach Parrish and Northview. Well, that's who we played first because of the way the pairings. You may remember we won that game at Opelika. Sadly, that's where Kenneth Franks, a student, was stabbed in the parking lot leaving the game. Opelika was extremely hostile. And that's where I'm going with my question. I'm sorry for so long-winded.
No, it's great.
Did you guys ever, you always seem to get together with the opposing team's cheerleaders at halftime.
Yes.
Talk about that ritual and how was it niceties? Was it not so nice? What was going on there?
So I have to say what I remember, and this all comes kind of full circle. I know Cece's watching. Hi, Cece. Hi, Jackie. I remember the ritual of running. We would hold hands, run across the field, sit with the other team, watch the band. I loved watching the band and was very entertained there. What I remember from that, Bernard, is Cece helping break down what had happened and what needed to happen. And of course, we know that Cece was dating you, and Cece was our informant on the sidelines. So we would take our cues from Cece. Like we knew, this is so embarrassing because I know we've got some titans on this call, but I hate to admit it, but a lot of times the cheerleaders, it's all about the skirts and the dancing. We knew what a touchdown was. We knew that was good. Cece was the one who could break it down, and she could tell us what had to happen in this game in order to advance. And so what you've just covered, Bernard, with going over Opelika and J.O. Johnson, I remember all of that now, but I only understood the chessboard because Cece Cotton was helping the cheerleaders understand that. That's and cool. Fun fact, this may have gotten covered before, but Northview played Huffman in the finals, and Cece's first cousin, Chris, was on that team. And so there was just sort of this tension between. And
he scored the first touchdown of the game as well.
I didn't remember.
He sure did.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, because we were down in that game, and then it wasn't until Aristotle picked up the fumble and ran it back 90 plus yards to tie the game and swing the momentum back toward us. And then we scored the next 4 touchdowns after that. But you're right.
Adrenaline is going right now, just remembering it all. It really is. So I wish I had some nice story about the cheerleader ritual. But I just remember Cece breaking it down for us and saying, this is what happened. This is what has to happen. And we took all of our cues from her to understand what was going on.
That's funny. I'm sure that all of the cheerleaders had various levels of knowledge.
I should speak for myself. I knew touchdown good.
Carrie, what about the decisions? How did y'all come up with the decisions about each week was a different theme?
Yes.
And some weeks I thought they were awesome and I applauded them. Other weeks I just kind of silently rolled my eyes like, oh, here we go. But how did y'all come up with the themes each week?
Well, I love that you even noticed that because we weren't always sure because, y'all had like tough game face on and you would sit at the end of the gym and, the performance was for you. And then we would go and do the cheers. The performance was for you, the football team. And then we would break out and go cheer in front of our respective classes. I feel like themes, I seem to remember the music was based upon whatever was popular at the time. So whether it was Michael Jackson Thriller or NXS, I remember different songs at the time being, the song of the day. So we had to come up with some fun dance. I think the themes, I have no idea. Honestly, we should ask Elizabeth Tucker that. That was her job.
Or maybe Miss Hemby. Miss Hemby may have, if she at that time, I think was one of the sponsors. I remember a lot of Madonna. I do remember a lot of Michael Jackson.
Thriller.
Yeah, a lot of Thriller. Yeah. I can remember our senior year, and I don't know if they could get away with this now, but you guys made tombstones of several members of the Dothan High team, the seniors.
Yeah.
And because I
Well, a
think the
funeral.
theme was like bury the Tigers,
Yeah.
but it would like there would be a tombstone and it would say Donald Battle number 10 or whatever it was. And it had probably a dozen of those. And I always thought that was kind of funny. But yes, the football players sat at the end of the gym and were supposed to be stoic, but you know, all the guys were watching you guys, of course. I do want to welcome, let's see, Rick Kazanave, Ashley Griffin McGee. Thank you guys for stopping in. But yeah, I always thought the
Steve and I
theme
had
was really cool.
trigonometry and geometry together. He was like the best math student that I ever knew at Northview.
We all learned a little bit from Rick, that's for sure. I miss seeing Rick.
Yeah.
So let's talk about after the state championship game was over, and you knew that you were done, at least from a high school standpoint, of cheering for football.
Yeah.
I don't think you cheered for basketball, but I can't remember. And here's my question. Did you have any aspirations or desires to cheer it past high school? Or did you think that was it for you?
Heavens no. It's important to know your limitations. My brother was the college cheerleader. My brother had, of course, played for the championship team in '81. And he got to Alabama, and I think his buddies put him up to try out for cheerleader. And he actually was the mic man at the University of Alabama, who ran along the side of the line.
I remember watching and listening to Joseph many times be the yell leader on the microphone and being very proud. That guy's from my high school. I know him.
Yeah. I knew my limitations, but certainly have watched with pride as a lot of Northview cheerleaders have gone on to cheer in college. That's a whole other level of elite sport that was a non-starter for me. But was super proud. I mean, I think about, and Bernard, I know that you do this same sort of format for your Vanderbilt team. Mm-hmm. And those of you who went on to play college ball, I think that we had a level of respect for knowing that there was extra talent, extra effort, that was the composite of who you were. So I was not surprised when you went on to Vanderbilt. And all of the cheerleaders and basketball players, football players, baseball players who went on to play college level, really had a lot of respect for what that meant, and just the time in. And of course, we know now as parents, and my husband was a college athlete, and knowing on this side what goes into having to play at that level is a whole other ball game that I certainly was never worthy of entering. So,
well, thank you for mentioning that. But this may be what I'm going to ask you, maybe a little touchy. But for those of you who don't know, Carrie went on to SMU. Now, in the early 80s, the Pony Express was a very famous team for SMU in Dallas, and they had Eric Dickerson, they had Craig James, and some other players. By the time you got there in the fall of '86, if you don't know, they shut down the program. They effectively, the NCAA killed the program for all kind of violations that are very well known.
Yeah.
Did they have football during your years when you were at SMU? Did you go to the games? What were your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So interesting. When I went to SMU, we had football my freshman year, and we played actually in what was then called Texas Stadium. They've now got the really big new stadium that is phenomenal. But we played in Irvine, Texas, where the Cowboys played. And so you can imagine the SMU football program had sort of dwindled. And so we barely filled up it was not like going to an SEC game, to say the least. Right. And then we paid our penance through the death penalty, no football, and there had been a huge football tradition at SMU. And then senior year, they brought it back on campus, and there's a really strong tradition there now at SMU around football that's on the campus at a stadium that's been built up. So what I do remember, Bernard, is coming home, and I'm sure I was with you. We got together like Thanksgiving, and it was our class.
Mhm.
And I do remember getting a lot of ribbing from our classmates because it was, have you lost, why are you going to a school that would have the death penalty? So I do remember that. But yeah, it wasn't quite the same. I just, you couldn't top the experience at Northview.
Well, it's, if we're talking about it 30 odd years later,
Yeah.
it's clearly made an impression on our childhood memories. Now, some of the stories that my children still hear me say, they correct me when I have a fact or two that may have either embellished or I've changed from time to time, but that's why we have to go back and watch the videos to make sure we stay on track.
Okay, I have to ask you about this. We're a little
Uh-huh.
off topic, but I've noticed you're super involved on TikTok.
Oh boy, that's a
I'm
whole other
really
adventure.
liking your foot moves with Sydney and Emily.
Well, thank you. I
Yeah.
haven't been able to combine my experiences in high school with TikTok yet, but stay tuned. That may show up here from time to time.
Okay, we're counting on you. It's good stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Carrie, let's step outside cheerleading, but let's stay in the high school realm. I want to jog your memory a little bit about maybe some of the classes that you really enjoyed, or teachers, or parts of campus that really were memorable to you. There's so many that flood my memories. Anything in particular come about?
It's like, where do you start?
Yeah.
I was talking earlier with my husband. So many, this is where it gets tricky, because if I start naming there are just so many names of teachers who had high and personal touch in my life. I've spent my career in communications and media, and then, in corporate communications. And if I trace that all the way back, I would find a Ruth Hooks there really pushing all of us in her AP English class. If I go into my, interest in humanities and civics, I would trace it all the way back to Norma Jean Spivey, who, was the person who chaperoned my first trip to Europe. So these were people who planted seeds that, at the time, they were teachers who were driving us hard, but I had so much respect for them. And when I look back on the choices in my life, I can trace them back to so many of the teachers and friends at Northview.
You also
really,
had,
my mother was a
well,
counselor
I was
at
just getting ready to say.
Bernard, were you in her class?
No, I don't think I took your mother.
Well, I guess when your mom's teaching,
I'm turning on a light, but go ahead.
when your mom's teaching at the school, she was never my teacher or counselor, but I know that she played a role in so many people's lives, helping to just introduce them to opportunities that really shaped and made a big difference in their lives. So it's hard for me to go on and on because there are just so many people, but it was a wholesome, good, diverse, large, complex environment that we were in. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I mean, I always tell people I went away to college. I went to school in Texas, as you mentioned, and I was never running away from anything. I loved my experience that culminated at Northview. It was really special. I hope that there are those kinds of experiences still going on in high schools. So
I'll share with you one of the vivid memories I have. It didn't matter where my homeroom class was my last couple of years. I would always try to walk through the front door of the school. I just thought that was such an interesting, magical's not the right word, but Miss C was always there. You could always count on the same people, whether they were students or part of the faculty being there. And I just loved walking through the front doors. And I know that may sound funny, and most kids just don't even want to be at school at that time, but I just always made it a point to get there a minute or two earlier than I really needed to be And I know my brother Robert, who rode with me my senior year, his freshman year, and I wouldn't let him talk the entire ride from the house to the school. He still has memories, unfortunately, about that. But I always just made it a point to walk through the front door because I just thought it was pretty cool. And that may be odd, but that was just me.
And then when you got glimpses of Dr. Smith, there was always I had such reverence for him.
Mm-hmm.
He was approachable, but he was larger than life.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, you would get kind of glimpses of him over there. Miss C always had every answer to any question you could have. And so if you didn't know, go ask Miss C. So it sounds like she still has the answers to the questions. Grateful for that.
And speaking of Dr. Smith, you know, high fives and elbows and fist bumps, that wasn't the norm back then. It was slapping five, like, give me five. Dr. Smith would always hold out his palm and he said, give me five as I walked by. That's just that was just him, just saying hello.
Okay, you wouldn't let Robert talk in the car.
Yeah, I wasn't a morning person, still not.
Okay.
That's all it was.
You were like psyching yourself up to,
I was subjected my sophomore year. Blake Hall drove this Z280 or something like that. It was silver.
Super cool car. I remember it.
It was, but you could hear him 5 or 6 houses down the street because he played the same song, and I still can't listen to it. Rick Springfield's Jesse's Girl. Played it every day, the whole ride to school. We didn't speak. It was at volume 800. And I don't know, I shudder to think at that, but I do want to welcome Norris Thomas and Chuck Jackson. We're getting close to the end of our conversation with Carrie Johnson Kurlander. We're just kind of reliving some good old days. Let's talk about we were in 8th grade when Joseph was a senior. You were never in school at the same time. I'm 3 years apart from Robert, but you were 4 from Joseph. Do you have, and you were mentioning earlier how you knew all of the older kids. And I assume that meant the older football players and probably some of the cheerleaders, whoever his friends were. I assume you knew all of them. Did you ever envision, or maybe this is the only thing you envisioned back then, that at that time you were one day going to be one of them, going to be on the Varsity Cheer Squad?
Oh, I mean, that was, that was, I don't know if I envisioned it. I hoped it. And it was, those were the kids you aspired to be. You knew their names. They were celebrated in the yearbook. So, I never thought about that way, but I can't help but think that it was the example that I was aspiring to, because our family was always at Rip Hughes Stadium, when we were little kids, Dothan High and then Northview. So, that's what was celebrated. And when you're in your hometown and the community's coming together and yelling and all cheering the same words, how can you not want to be part of that? Hey, Bernard, I was earlier, do you know all the words to the fight song?
If I pull it up, I can sing it, but no, I don't.
I'm going to spare everybody, but I know it started with, we are from Northview High, we are the Cougars, and that is why. I could sing it, but I'm going to spare you. Mm-hmm. And then I need something about, we are the best. Miss C, you need to help us, Miss C. We need help with the words to the fight song. I would love to get those words.
In the group a few months ago, but you're right. I did not have that handy. I should have put you on the spot and had it with me today. But I can tell you one of my middle school memories about seeing all those guys who were playing on the varsity back in the day. In my mind's eye back then, they were so much taller than they are now. Or maybe I just caught up a little bit in height. But I always had good thoughts about that. And Cece says, of all the rest, love that maroon and gold. I guess that maybe is part of the.
Yeah, I think she's feeding you lyrics. I think Cece needs to be the next guest and teach everybody the fight song.
She probably could. But Carrie, I want to thank you for such a fun conversation. This was so many great memories here. I hope it was okay for you.
Such good stuff. I'm just so honored to be asked. And so nostalgic looking at the cougar over your head. I had no idea you were actually going to go back to the gym and
Just for you.
yeah,
Just for you.
good stuff. It's great. Go Cougars. So grateful for what we all share and have in common.
Absolutely. And as guys, we're trying to do these each Wednesday night. I've got Coach Rick Cleveland lined up for next week, Mike Henry after that, and several more coming up. And we're going to get into the younger generation, the kids who played in the 2000s and more recently for Coach Josh Parrish. They'll be sometime in June. But I hope you guys are being patient about this pandemic, being smart. I know our states are starting to unroll the different entrances into society, if you will, but just do the right thing, please. We'll get there. We're going to be through this, and we're going to have some version of college football this fall. I can feel it. But thank you again, Carrie, and much love to Brian and everybody in Atlanta.
It's great. See you soon.
Good night, guys.
Thank
Y'all
you.
be well. We'll see you next Wednesday.